tragically, she's not a member of any 12-step program. But we had dinner with her a few weeks ago, and just would not leave her alone with all the questions of AA history and all. And I bought her dinner, and she owes me, and we're probably by the time I'm finished with her, she's going to be in Debtors Anonymous. But we have to get her some home, But she really has found a home with us, and I don't know what it is, but a friend of mine who's been involved with me on this committee has seen how I've dealt with trying to pull this thing together with some help. And at one point we didn't think the weekend was going to happen. And he sort of said, Dave, I recognize that you sort of have a way of doing things. It's sort of like a pit bull. You get your teeth into something and you don't let go until you get it done. And I was reading Nell's book, and I think this might be Why She Loves Me. And she's talking about Bill's shortcomings and character defects. She can love him, I guess. It says, I believe his most obvious character defect, one he spoke about himself, was his power drive. Once he got his teeth into an idea or proposal that he considered necessary and good for AA's future, he seldom let go until he pushed it through. He could really be tenacious and stubborn, and he had absolute tunnel vision on these subjects. That is the way he was able to accomplish what he did. Bill was always battling apathy, ultra-conservatism, and trustees or factions within the fellowship who did not agree with him. It's a wonderful bit of information that she's shared in this book, but she might even give us the Reader's Digest condensed version tonight. So I'd like to introduce a dear friend of AA, Nell Wing.
This is why I love AA so much, because there's so many dear friends, okay? Over so many years. So I'm very grateful to David and to Barbara. Where's Barbara? Oh, here she is. Uh-huh. Thank you. This is for you. Hello? I'm very, very grateful to be here. Now, this is a little too near, is it? Okay. We'll keep going. How is this? That sounds better, doesn't it? It's really, really lovely to be here. And I'm grateful you are here because it suddenly occurred to me this morning that, holy cow, this is the Republican National Convention tonight. And I said, I bet there won't be too many people here. And maybe I almost wish well, not really, because I'm not involved in that Republican thing. But you did show up, and so that's very nice. I'm very grateful for it. I have notes, and I hope you won't mind my kind of referring to them once in a while, because anybody that knows me knows I rattle on and on and on, and it goes on forever. And because I go from one anecdote to another, I've been around so long that I've known so many people and so many things that have happened, and I feel kind of free, and I feel great tonight. This is super. I mean, I just can't get over it. I really do feel so good tonight. So that when people try to nail me down to a certain amount of time, it can be very hard. However, I usually have to have some notes in front of me because I'm not telling my story, so that I don't go into a kind of a recitation, so to speak. That's not the right word, of course, of what I went through and in, say, some kind of manner. But I'm all over the place, and that's what I tend then to say, oh, God. For about a year ago, I was out at my nephew's group, And I thought, oh, to hell with any notes and whatnot. I'm just going to talk right off the top of my head. Well, it was a big mistake because by the time I got started, is that something there? One episode led to another, one anecdote led to another, and then I couldn't remember why I had started in the first place. I said, gee, what was I saying? Somebody in the front row told me, yelled it out, and that happened about 6 times. And they were sitting on the edge of their seats waiting for me to forget again where I was. So I thought, that's the end of that. I better have some notes before me, and also have a little bit of how to arrange these things. Anyway, what I wanted to do. So I'm very happy that you're here, and the convention doesn't begin till 9:30 tonight. So you'll be sure to get back for that. I think no problem. Now, what I'd like to do is, where is it? Do you know that, have you seen or do you have a copy of Dr. Bob's children's book? Young Bob and Sue's book? Well, I'm going to show you something new tonight. They are, Bob I love. Bob is like my brother. We've been close for years, and Betty, his wife. And the last time that I saw them was in Texas back in May when I was down there. And, it was always such a great reunion. In fact, I got one little picture of them taken from the dinner that we had down there. So this is their book, Children of the Healer, the story of Dr. Bob's kids. And it is in the first person, their stories, their 2 stories told in the first person, what their lives were like, what they went through, and also talked about their mother and father. So it's a very, very interesting. It's a very down to earth, very honest, very pragmatic type book. So what I thought I might do is just since that won't take too long, I'll start it out and you can look at it. And here's some, at the same time, here's some pictures. I won't bother telling all about it. Here's some pictures of the new office. Has anybody been to the new AA office? You have? Oh, great. Anybody else? Hey, my feet are sticking to something here. Not that I... Always something, right? But that is, and besides, I like Bob's book because it has pictures. Mine doesn't. The reason mine has no pictures is because I have 1,000 pictures of Lois and a lot of albums of her and during the events, the people that happened up at Stepping Stones. But Al-Anon does not use her picture. But they very graciously said I could if I wanted to, and of course I didn't want to. If they don't, I don't want to do it either. And so I couldn't use her picture. We can use Bill's, but the real good picture I have of Bill was some years ago, taken with my boyfriend. And so I decided that maybe I shouldn't, I was leaning towards him. And that would be a nice picture of Bill by himself, and maybe should have taken that because that's what I wanted anyway. The other turn down was because a lot of the buildings, houses, stepping stones, the office itself, where some of the meetings were held, et cetera, out at Akron, had a lot of people in them, AAs, and so I couldn't use the pictures of those. And the pictures that I had of nobody in the houses or around the yards or anything, the publishers felt that was too dull. And so we didn't have a single picture in it, and I'm very disappointed. So I'm very envious with this book. However, I'm very glad that they are able to have it. Lots of books, of course, have been written about AA. We all know that. We've all read, I'm quite sure, a great many of the books that have been out. Pardon me, I want to get a little bit. Can I move this like this? Okay, now I can look from side to side. It's a good thing. I think it's wonderful that people like to write about AA and tell their stories or get stories of other people, the old timers particularly. I think it's very helpful to all of us and to the fellowship itself. The only thing is that now so many are gone. So many of the old timers are gone. I mean, it's almost a very depressing thing for me to go through because I knew so many, only because I've been around 1,000 years, you know. To miss them, and I miss them dreadfully. Fortunately, there's so many good friends still left with us, and so that's very nice. But a lot of them are gone. And it's depressing, of course, a bit, but on the other hand, I'm amazed that I've been around so long. It is now 53 years. I'm 75, and there's 53 years since I read about the magazine article in Liberty Magazine. I was in college. I was a junior, 39, sitting just about this time, 53 years ago. About a month later, it'd be a month later in September. And I remember thinking, gee, this is a great idea. My dad was a teacher and a justice of the peace, and my goodness, how many times, the most every night, the state troopers would come banging on our door with my father and bringing in the local drunks to be sentenced and analyzed or whatever Dad had to do to them. Many of them, of course, were his best friends. These were people that were in the town jobs, and everybody liked to drink. I mean, we had a lot of drinking going on because especially during the 30s, right after or during Prohibition, Canada sent down a lot of ships into our little coves down in Lake Ontario, where we lived right near Lake Ontario. And so there was a lot of liquor available to anybody who wanted it. And rumor had it, my dad liked a couple beers himself now and then. My brother denies it, but I think that was true. But anyway, there was something about that Liberty magazine that really got me. And I remembered it all these years. Now, the only thing that I thought was a little bit too bad was this God connection. Now, you know, you're in college, and I don't know about you, but we were all radicals. I mean, we read Liberty magazine, and which was kind of it had a lot of, Saturday Evening Post was very staid and very proper, kind of that sort of thing, but not Liberty magazine. So there it was very wonderful, but I thought that too bad. The wonderful fellowship here getting started, but where is it going to go with that God business? Now, I say that to tell you, don't ask me anything about to prophesy anything, because obviously I don't know much about doing that. when I thought AA was going to fall through the floor, I'm not very good at that sort of thing. Anyway, I was a junior in college, graduated in 1940, went down to Texas, taught in a Mexican school, 1941, came back. 40s were, I'll talk a little bit about that later as vis-a-vis AA. But it was a time where guys were at war. We gals were all over the place doing our own thing. And it was a great time. And so I had read not only the Saturday Evening Post, I'd gotten down to continue with what I was doing. I had gotten down to Texas, came back, got in the Coast Guard, in the ladies' spars we were called, and I had to raise my right hand. I got into that just by accident, because when I was working as a secretary after coming back from San Antonio, a couple of my friends said, come on down, because we're going to go into the spars, and we'd like you to come down and be with us. I said, well, I don't know. I'm not really too interested or anything. I went down anyway. So while I was there, they persuaded me to take the tests and the examinations and everything. I didn't want to really do that. Turned out that I passed everything. They didn't. And so 2 weeks later, I was raising my right hand, promising to support my country and whatnot. That's how I got into the spars. And so I was there. And then coming out of there, I decided that, when I think about it, I can't believe it, go down to Mexico, because I had talent for sculpture and art, And I would go down there and join the great European society that was down at San Miguel de Allende, right above Mexico City, where the American University was, and where there was a great sculpture in charge there. So I needed a little more money than I'd gotten my mustering out pay from the Coast Guard. So I went down to New York, went to an employment agency, showed my resume, and she came across the table and sat down and said, how would you like to work at Alcoholics Anonymous? I said, oh, I'd love it. I just blew her right off her chair. She couldn't believe it. And she expected me to say, what do I mean? What's Alcoholics Anonymous? And so that's how I got to AA, and didn't really, had a couple stayed a little while thinking about, going down, and got down to Mexico, and Bill would tease me and say, Nell's going to leave us and head for the border. And I said, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, obviously I didn't do it, so I was there for the next 38 years, 36 years. Never got down to Mexico, except at the border when I had been down to San Antonio off and on too. But the point is that there was a lot going on during the 40s. It was a time, as I say, the Saturday Evening Post. There were two excellent articles there were articles in Time and Newsweek, and two excellent articles in the Reader's Digest magazine, which was a favorite of my mother's. My mother loved the Reader's Digest. And I'm kind of glad, too, that I saw those articles because they were really, really very good. And so that is how I came down and got into the office and got situated into this fellowship and stayed here. So that was 47 years ago. And it's been 21 years since Bill died and 4 years since Lois died. And of course I miss Bill, but Lois I still am very depressed. Not sad. I'm not talking about being, sick or anything like that, but there's a bit of energy that has left. Oh, I know what's happening. It's these buttons on this coat. Pardon me, I just happened to realize that. But the office, when I first came, and now I'd like to get into what this fellowship was like during the 40s. When I came to the office, I was greeted, taken in to meet Bill. I saw one of the girls having a paper bag over her head, dancing around the office. I learned that was Mary Lou, our princess, we called her. And I found out that everybody was doing their own thing. We had about 13 people, 13 employees, 2 staff. We call them general secretaries then. The early 50s, we started calling them staff when we had a little bit more organization. Bobby was a marvelous person who was the general secretary after Ruth Hawk left, the first AA one. And she was a perfectly wonderful lady. Goodness knows how much influence and what she did for so many people, thousands and thousands of people. But she didn't have a lot of business, a talent to keep it going and to keep things under control. Bill was out traveling all around the U.S. and Canada, trying to persuade the fellowship that they needed certain guidelines and certain things that would, part of this vision, and things that would put the fellowship, stabilize it, and some supervision and that sort of thing, like the traditions, and then the General Service Conference idea. Later on, it was the concepts and whatnot. And that. So he was traveling all over. The office was kind of all by itself, so to speak. The trustees had hands off. They didn't believe in interfering or trying to get things going. It was the staff, that was their business. They were just kind of standing apart. As a matter of fact, neither one of the 2 staff members when I came, and I don't think for a while the other ones when they came at the end of the decade, were invited to the trustees' meetings. Once in a while, a trustee would kind of walk in and see what was going on. But it was a hands-off. It was I call it chaotic. I know that sounds really bad, but it was really chaotic. As I say, all the good things that were going on was kind of almost, if the office itself, almost second class, so to speak, or wasn't up to snuff because there wasn't that kind of supervision that was needed there. So there was, for example, there was one of everybody. There was one clerk, one shipping clerk. There was Mary Lou, who was the office princess, and there was Anne, the bookkeeper, who, when I came, I was kind of the first of the new breed. What happened was that Charlotte, who was the second staff, pardon me, at the office, saw what was going on when she came about 6 months before I did, and was shocked at what the state and what was going on, asked her friend, Marion, to come, who worked with her at McGraw-Hill, ask her to come and, bring some talent and get some supervision going in this office. And Marion did. And it was Marion who interviewed me that first day. And we were talking about, she'd been in the waves, I'd been in the spars. We talked all about our Navy and our service days. And finally, we got around to talking about maybe how much money, we're going to get and whatnot. I guess I don't know who initiated it. I think probably I did. And Marion said, now look, Nell, this is a spiritual program. And we offer spiritual help here. And quickly, without saying so, told me I'm going to get a hell of a lot of money and the salary. And sure enough, when I got my first paycheck, I realized that that's exactly what it was, and it was going to take a long time to get down to Mexico under these circumstances. So that was Marion. Marion is still a good friend. I was out to the island. She lives in Montauk Point Island, and so I was out to see her not too long ago. And we reminisce about the old days, and stuff like that. She's very good. And so that was Marion. And then we had the bookkeeper, the bookkeeper, who, one bookkeeper it was, who liked, when she sent out bills or notices or something like that, would always put little notes on them and saying, keep up the good work. You're doing well. Don't just keep on going. You're an AA, da-da-da-da-da-da. And so when she finally left, she was one of the last to leave when Marion took over, and Charlotte came and Marion took over. The old staff left. The old employees left, nearly all of them. I was the first of the new breed. Anne was about the last to go. And when she left, she asked Bill if she could have a recommendation as a group therapist. Now, she based all that on her little notes that she wrote on the bills. And Bill laughed and said, he handed it to Bobby. Bobby said, oh no, he wrote her a letter and said, oh no, we really can't do that, And it was Anne, who, the bookkeeper, who I came into hadn't been there at the office too long. I came in early, very early one morning and opened the door. And I was so startled because here was our little washstand right near the door, actually, not too far from the entrance. And here was this guy, practically naked, shaving his cheeks, his face. And I said, what's he doing here? It turned out that Anne had invited him to stay all night because he was one of the authors, of the writers of one of the Reader's Digest articles, and he had no place to stay. So she'd asked him to stay in the office. And so that was what was happening when I saw him. And I tell you, there was one story after story after story, could keep on going and going. But there was a turnaround. Now, I'd like to, I'm showing you that the three teensy-weensy, or telling you about these three teensy-weensy little rooms that we had, and as our office. 13 people, including Bill when he came down once a week. He came down once a week down on Tuesday. Sometimes maybe it'd stay around a Wednesday, but usually it was once a week. And so the new office up at 475 Riverside Drive between 119th and 120th Street. is, and some of these pictures will, maybe give you, photos will give you an idea. Absolutely. I felt like a country bumpkin going up there and looking around, and you could get lost in this huge building with this huge floor. Then there was another floor where the grapevine, I think, was down the second, in the bottom one, and staff, or the meeting rooms or something like that. But this, and then there's pictures also of the passing around of the archives. Now, for heaven's sake, stop it. The archives are magnificent. And the whole thing is so well put together, and that it looks just beautiful. It'll go on for years and years and years, I'm sure. Some of the pictures will show you a little bit, and the entrance, wow! I mean, all these couches, and so well organized. I mean, it just really blows your mind. Just blows your mind. It's so super. Who would ever have thought this little teensy organization going into, now I think there must be 150 or 125, 35 employees at that office now. And I've forgotten how many staff members, but it's really something, really, really something. I hope you go up and see it. Anyway, what was going on in the 40s? And that's really what time is it? Oh, what do you want to talk about? It was, besides what was going on at the office, there was two sides. I mean, there was the outside, what was going on in the fellowship, and on the inside, around the fellowship. Two different things, black and white, day and night. What happened in the outside? It was the 40s. It was a very special decade. It was war, mostly of the early 40s, and then the returning servicemen building families. I live in one of these projects put up by Metropolitan Life in New York, Stuyvesant Town, you probably know it, which was put up in about 46 for the returning servicemen who would be married and start families and new children and that sort of thing, and that started off very inexpensively at that point, but I'll tell you, it's gotten larger now. I mean, it's gotten more expensive now. Peter Cooper, of course, has always been a little bit more expensive. But this was type of the service was very important. And as I say, I know because I was in it too, and I was part of this whole period of what was going on. And we had, in the early 40s, I guess about 400 AA members in service. And they were the ones, after the war, remember they had some of the guys stay in these countries, especially in Japan and Germany, enemy countries, to help get them started in a better way and oversee what was going on. Some of these were AAs, and they started AA in Germany. Frankfurt and Munich started by the work of AA soldiers that were stationed there, servicemen that were stationed there. Also in Japan, that got the ball rolling a little bit at that time too, and also in some of the countries, Guam, for example. So the servicemen were doing a service, another service that benefited the beginning and the growth of this fellowship all over the world. And also the women were doing their part too, and as I say, we're running around the country and we're doing things, and they were part in the service also. Now, like so many fellowships before AA, the Washingtonians, the Jacoby Club, the Emmanuel movement in Boston, had kind of a framework and process of helping people very much like AA on maybe a one-to-one basis. Certainly the Washingtonians did too. And then there was this business of bashing the wives a bit, saying the wives were all to blame for the husband's alcoholism. Oh, this was very popular. You know, you had to blame somebody, right? And wives were the nearest people around to do it. And so they had started wives groups, especially Richard Peabody when he started his group analysis and whatnot like that. Always made sure the wives attended and were there. Do you know what the Japanese call their wives? chrysanthemums. And do you know what the Washingtonians call their wives? Now, this is Washingtonian. This is about a century ago in the 1830s, up to about 1840. They were called Martha Washingtons, and very appropriate. And so it was. The wives had a part, just like they do in AA today, and did very early on. But this was the 40s, and this was okay. What about the outside? What was the outside going on that was helpful to AA in getting involved? Okay. Professional people were helping AA besides the Rockefeller people. As you know, Bill always referred to the three-legged stool about helping AA, the religion, medicine, and AA's own experience. Called it the three-legged stool. And these, there's so many, some are in my book, and I won't recite them all now, but there were a lot of these professional people that were supportive when AA was not well known, that needed, not that it needed publicity, I don't mean that, but supportive of what the ideas were, what was going on in AA, and they made a great deal of difference. And also, they were the loners. During the war, a group that was going all over in the islands and in the countries, the overseas countries, carrying the message all by themselves. There was construction workers going over to the Arab countries and so many of those were carrying the message there too. Of course, the Arabs weren't supposed to be drinking outside. They did a lot outside the country, but they weren't supposed to in their own country, in their own surroundings, in their faith. However, one young prince got caught in alcoholism and is sent to a hospital. And one of the construction workers, or a couple of them, were there to help this young guy. One of the loners was over in Sumatra and talked about getting in touch with the Buddhists, about getting their support for what was going on in their country. And so they asked one of the Buddhist priests, and he read the 12 steps. He said, "Why, yes." He said, "This is what we believe, too," and that's true. I'm a Buddhist myself, and I know exactly what it is that there was the taking responsibility for yourself, the honesty, the whole thing. It's complete AA. This is what makes AA's principles so widespread. Everybody in the world can use them. I mean, it helps everybody. Me included, when I was in the hospital, cancer or whatever, a lot of things. And I carried the message there to a lot of the people, and they wanted me to stay and continue to do it. So there's when I was thought there was a heart attack or heart problems, I went to Strand Clinic on 34th Street, talked to a young gal who was a doctor, and she asked me what I did. I told her. I said, "Well, I'm long retired now." She says, "Well, what did you do?" So I told her. That's all you have to do is ask me, and boy, I'm off to the races. And she says, "Oh, I practice the 12 steps too." I said, "Oh, what group do you belong to?" She says, "I'm not a member. I just love it." When I was a receptionist the first 7 years when I first came to the office, and during that period in 1950, I started working for Bill too, and but I was receptionist till 1954, and I can't tell you how many people, at least once a week, at least one person, no, I'm not exaggerating at all, came into the office and asked me for a copy of the 12 steps. And I forgot. I soon learned not to ask them what group they belonged to because I knew that they didn't belong to probably any group. But that was what was happening. People, even in those years, were aware of the need and the value of these 12 steps, and they wanted to use the program, as they still do now. I told Bill in the 40s, I said, "This is going to go all over the world." He said, "You can say it, I can't." But it is, and as we know, I mean, when you think it's up to there's a little group right out 4 miles outside the North Pole, for example. I mean, workers obviously doing something up there. And they've been on the South Pole for a long time, that's a big area, and workers and whatnot. So there were a lot of AAs in that area. It's been, little Nepal asked us to come over and bring AA over there. Can you believe it? Nepal. And one of my friends, AA friends, went over with a minister, priest, and helped them get AA started in that country. And this is just all over the world. It's unbelievable. Anyway, there has been one of the things on the outside that's going on was the steady growth of AA. These are good things. Also, the radio, coming back to the more mundane things now, the radio had Aunt Jenny, which was a soap opera, and would have occasionally a story about AA. And there was also Ask an Alcoholic. And I think that I heard that was coming back on radio. And have any of you heard that? Ask an Alcoholic? Yeah. Well, one of the good radio programs, series of programs that came out of Hartford, that we have in the office, and also Detroit, WWJ, and great big wheel of it, we have it in the office, that did a lot of good, that carried the message in so many ways. So there was lots of things going on the radio, too. Newspapers, of course, the media, we have scrapbooks. Galore, when I left, I had about 15 scrapbooks done, I guess. I don't know whether I hope there's some more done now. So many things to do. But there was, and if you read those newspapers, because we started doing the scrapbooks about the 1939, at least, maybe at 1940, and you see these funny pictures. And here's a picture of a guy with a big mask over his face, like he was a burglar. And you'd see him with another guy walking down an alley, he with a mask over his face going to a meeting. And there was a picture, oh gosh, there's so many, but these, somehow I remember, I've talked about these so many times, a shot taken of back of Bill on the podium towards the audience. The audience has white handkerchiefs covering their face, and they're taking a picture of all of this. There was so much. It's not silly. It's trying to do the protection, make the protection in the best way that could be done and thought about. So there was a lot going on in that area, in the newspapers, and they carried very, very good articles. And I remember that in the very early days, they used AA with initial, quotation marks, around the A period. Oh boy, so many things. And the movies, of course, there were a heck of a lot of movies. Remember Harvey? And Come Back a Little Sheba. There was, the actress, Bergner, I can't think of her name. There were so many. No, this was a German girl. A good actress, a wonderful actress, been in Germany on the screen and all of that, and she came over here on the stage. Huh? Maybe that was the one. Maybe so. But that was made a big hit over here. Cup of Trembling. It was called Cup of Trembling. It was a movie first, and then I think into a play or something like that. Also there, and of course the big turning point, really, in this fellowship was a movie. You know which one? The Lost Weekend. Oh, that was very important too. I remember that melody, the opening up. We went to the preview of that at the office, and we all just fell off. It was so beautiful, that melody of Days of Wine and Roses, of course. No, Lost Weekend. That changed the complexion of how people viewed alcoholism like nothing else really did. It showed and you know it, you've all seen it maybe several times, I'm sure. It changed the concept of an alcoholic, not a low-class Bowery bum, but a middle-class or upper-class businessman, salesman, whatever, who got alcoholism, became an alcoholic, and became a Bowery bum, so to speak. And it showed how he could be helped and changed. And that really, we were bombarded from that time on, from the middle on, by movie companies to make movies. They wanted, I think about at least 6 movie companies. Made a big run to our door. The one that we considered for a long time, until about 49, was the Paramount script. And I thought it was kind of good because it was done by Robert Smith. And so I just thought that would be kind of sensible to have a movie written by Robert Smith. But it was decided not to do it, that it really wasn't, at that time, nobody could spend a lot of time. Bill was still traveling around the country. I mean, I was just telling you about the office things that couldn't be done. But later on, of course, there was the movies made not with AA, but about AA anyway. And so those were very good things. Also, there were, of course, a lot of books. There was This Believing World, Lewis Brown, I think his name was. I'd read this book in college, and it turned me around. This is what really changed my concept of spirituality, of religion. Not religion, but spirituality. It was a combination of composite of a lot of religions, and I just thought it was great. It was my father's book, and to this day I gave it to the archives. But that was very well read. It was read by everybody. All the, it's like Sermon on the Mount was read by all the AAs, and there were just ever so many. If a Man Be Mad, for example, by Harold Mayne, a story of his DTs. Now, I always think of the episode in The Office when I mention If a Man Be Mad, because we in those days, in the 40s, were kind of like an intergroup. Drunks would come and sit and go to sleep in the reception room. I was in the reception room, and I gave them the chair, and Ebby would come in. Ebby Thatcher would come in, and Ebby was a good friend. When he was sober, he was great. Very intelligent, very well trained, very knowledgeable, very good to talk to. But when he was drunk, oh wow, blasted Bill. He thought he should be, of course, the co-founder. Pardon me. And it was very difficult, and I can understand. I think it must have been very, very difficult for him because after all, he was the one that brought the message to Bill. And but he never, after about 2 years after he brought the message to Bill, he was sober. Then he went up to Albany where his family was, his brothers and sisters, and he got drunk. And from that time on, it was off and on. The big thing in New York that everybody, newcomers, wanted, their effort was to sober Abby up, be the one to do it. And didn't happen. It unfortunately, never really happened. One New York member got the idea of putting Ebby on a plane and sending him down to Texas, and with the approval of a couple of the guys down there, which they did too. Ebby didn't want to do it. He was very sour-faced, and but they put him on the plane. He went down. He was sober. Well, he had a brief for Ebby, a very brief, very light slip overnight, and in jail overnight, and. Then people would get him jobs and take care of him. And Ebby always said if he had a girl and a job, he could stay sober. Okay, he had that down in Texas, and he stayed sober. The gal had a big problem, drug problem, but Ebby took care of her, looked after her, took his job. This was for about, 5 years or something like that. So he had sobriety for a long time. However, she died, and Ebby got drunk. And so he came back north and stayed with Bill and Lois for a while. Then he went up to Schenectady, near Schenectady. Trying to think of the place where his hometown was. His brother was up there, Ken. Ebby's brother, Art, had been in AA. He was also an alcoholic. All his brothers were alcoholics. Just like one of the movie stars, all his brothers were alcoholics as well as himself. Runs in the family. We all know that. But Abby did then go up to a drying out place up near AA. Two AAs had it going up there, and they were very, very solicitous and careful of Abby. But he died finally, emphysema, and he died in 1966, March 1966. As a matter of fact, 3 guys died, important ones, if I can remember them. Abby, Dr. Tebow, and Sister Ignatia, all in about a week and a half's time. Often happens this way. And Bill got up to Abby's and Sister Ignatia's, but he couldn't get over to Dr. Tebow's funeral. But again, Abby's contribution, if you want to call it on a negative point of view, but the other side of the coin thing, but there it was. But coming back, and you know, even with notes, I don't pay any attention to them. I mean, I just run on and on. But to end up what the outside part of this was. Now, there are other things, but these are just the things I thought about. Alcoholism Agency started up about the latter part of the 40s. A lot of those started. Hazleton began about, 48, 49? And in a very small way. Interesting, Parkside, who did my book and Bob and Sue's book, is just about as big as Hazleton is now. It's all over the country. I mean, all over. And boy, they've got you running all over, too, I can tell you that. Hospitals, drying out places were forming very, very rapidly all over the place. You know something? I want to tell you something. My favorite, you want to know my favorite magazine? I think, and I tell this and use my long experience as a reason for telling you this. It's the Grapevine. The Grapevine, and I'm very definitely projecting it, because this happens to be, as a matter of fact, this is the July 90, and it's the overseas, it's the worldwide one. And the fact was that it was takes care of people, it shows people, events, history, everything that you want to know is from the Grapevine. It is just amazing what you can learn in there and what you can use it as a reference. If you want to look up something, do you know where anti-abuse first appeared in the Grapevine? Dr. Ruth Fox in New York was doing that. That was in 1950. I can't tell you the exact number, but in 1950 it appeared. But the Grapevine carries everything of news and the events that happen and the reasons and what's going on. It could be, say, what's going on would be a good title for it or something. But anyway, these are the outside things that were happening. And what about the inside? Well, again, coming back to what I was talking about, the office and the inside the AA area itself. I talked about the lack of supervision at the office. That was certainly true, and that continued for a long time. The trustees were hands-off. The employees were doing their own thing. Around the fellowship, now this just wasn't in the office. This is around the fellowship. There were guys who were starting newsletters. They called themselves founders. They thought Bill was vastly exaggerated in his accomplishments and what he did, and I can't tell you how many founders there were all over the country. It was truly. I mean, you didn't, where are you going to put all these people? And not only that, but the countries and many parts of the country, like California, was not too friendly. They wanted to start their own general service office, and they wanted to do their own thing on the west side, not depend on New York to do all these things. New York was not too popular in those days. And Bill was working so hard during this time to get started in this overseeing of these projects that he thought was terribly important, to bring them all together, and so that he couldn't be in two places at the same time. So, as I said, finally, what did happen, but to the office itself was, and I don't know whether it was the trustees who finally saw the light or whether Bill, in getting it started, got together a general service committee to oversee the office, which they did locally. And out of which, later in the 50s, came two very, very good general managers, Hank G. and Herb M. and maybe Bob H. I can't quite remember if Bob was in there too. But that started the shift going in the right direction of the work, the pathway that the office was following and would follow in the future. So that was what started going, and then in the 1950s we got going into the service period, and then more and more. So we're almost now into six decades, and of which I think the first 2 decades are really the really most important ones, because they tell what had to be overcome. It was frightful in many ways. I'm not really exaggerating at all, but it was something. The reason I say this, they took this all out of the book when I was 20 pages out of my book. I guess they thought I was bashing AA or something like that. The reason I talk about it is to show the miracle. This could have, AA is a miracle. It could have gone down the slats at any given point. For example, in the late 40s, this idea of Marty Mann, remember she had solicited from Prince, which she was able to do. That was her right to do for the National Committee on Alcohol, called NCEA at that time, Education on Alcoholism. But she said that in her letter of solicitation that AA would benefit by any contributions that they made. Well, the whole thing hit the fan. And AA could have gone down, disappeared at that point, because there was commotion going. Bill had to come back. Bill and Dr. Bob had their names on the National Committee letterhead as approving and whatnot. It's a very bad thing to do. Two traditions were there in danger. They took their names off the letterhead, but it was four full years before, and at the end of which, before this was keep going on, at the end of which, it shored up, made stable what the idea of self-support was, which then appeared in the approved copies listing that was approved by the First International Conference in 1950 in Cleveland, accepted by them, approved of the traditions. I mean, so that was a very, very difficult time. So there were so many things. So the miracle is that it lasted. For a long time, many members did not approve of getting in touch with people working in the field of alcoholism, merely because of the Marty Mann example and what was happening. So it was one of these things that had to be certainly overcome and whatnot. However, it went on, and the miracle is that AA went all over the world. Right now, today, there were about 1,200 groups when I first came to the office 47 years ago, about 40,000 members, and just a year or two later, there were 40,000 members just in California alone. So that's how fast it was starting to operate. And there are at least 175 or 6 countries that have AA. I don't know about you, but that just throws my mind. And there are about 96, probably near 100,000, 96,000, maybe near 100,000 groups now all over the world. And there are about 2,500,000, maybe even more, maybe near 3 million members all over the world. AA survived. It's a miracle. Now we have not only the General Service Conference in good order, we have the World Service Meeting every 2 years. Every other year it meets in New York. We have the European service meeting, ESM service meeting, yeah, for European, all of Europe. And we have the Ibero. I forgot, Ibero Convention Service. Maybe it's called a service meeting too, for Central America and South America, all over. So they're all using the same pattern, the same principles that we use too. So it's going on. A miracle. I want to close. Will you believe it? With again the grapevine. One of my dear friends, Dr. Oscar Olson, who I saw last in Seattle in 1990. Again, wrote for the overseas, the worldwide. He called his article "A Friend of the Fellowship." You know, wish I'd used that. That's great, a friend of the fellowship. Too bad, you know. But he says, in conclusion to his article, he says, in my opinion, AA is one of the century's miracles. And I am sure that AA still has a job to do in this troublesome world in creating individual miracles. True. And we will continue to do it. So thank you very much. And I think it's about time.